Do you know, Christopher, what this looks like if you look in the screen?
No.
It looks like Aragon on The Hobbit. So you've got Aragon with the, and then the Hobbit. You can only see my head.
That's hilarious. we can add it.
Yeah.
Some new profile photos.
Yeah. So welcome to the Orientational Messaging from Aragon and the Hobbit, from Lord of the Rings. Today's webinar is going to be about orientational messaging, and I'm just going to tee that up a little bit, and then I'm going to hand over to Christopher. It's the third of a 3-series webinar that we've held on the messaging architecture. And the messaging architecture is the spine of the deal orchestration. Yeah, it's absolutely critical. And the first part of the messaging architecture, which we did in the first part of the series, is the fundamental messaging, which takes the client or the stakeholder from unaware to I want to buy. In the second part of the series, we talked about deal closing messaging, right? Which takes the stakeholder from I want to buy to actually signing the contract, closing the deal, right? And we talked about the big difference between the type of messaging between the two.
Totally different.
Totally different. And these two, if you want to brush up on this, or if you haven't seen this, you can go on our YouTube channel. So that's Mega Deals Advisory, and you can see those recorded. So today is the third part of this, which is the orientational messaging. And I'll actually leave it there and hand it over to you, and you can explain what orientational messaging is and then get us started.
Great. Super.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. So as you can see on the screen, there are two common challenges when doing enterprise deals and mega deals. And a lot of companies are struggling to reach the top decision makers. Almost everyone we work with struggle with that. The second thing, I mean, there are a lot of things they struggle with, but these are the two we're going to target with orientational messaging. The first one is, how do we reach, engage top decision makers in slightly large organizations? And the second one is, how do we, especially in the sales funnel, engage a large enough audience so we can win the consensus war internally in that account, and also including some external stakeholders. So those are the two we're going to address today with the orientational messaging. So this is a snapshot of the core team and the extended team. We're growing pretty rapidly, which is extremely fun. And we rarely sell in the webinar. I will actually spend 2 minutes on selling. So some of you are coming across us in the webinars. You might have read the book. Some of you have heard or listened to some of the podcast episodes. You might have seen our ads. You see us on LinkedIn, etc. That's the way we engage people. And then people reach out to us and say, okay, I'm really interested. Could we have a meeting? So what we typically do is not to have a meeting immediately. We actually say, okay, we have a hidden version of a 50-minute executive summary of the whole Mega Deals discipline that we can send you. It's a private link. And when you watch that video, if you and your team are saying, we want to work this way, then we engage in a meeting. And then we typically sell a 2 full day or a 4 half-day workshop series. I'm not going to go in depth into that. Typically, after having done that, some clients say, okay, now I can manage this on my own. But quite a few companies are saying, we want you to get engaged on a longer term engagement. So we do both deep dives, which are specific items like negotiation, like an even deeper dive into messaging. It could be how to act more media. And we have a pretty good curriculum already. Financial fluency is another one, which is hyper interesting. And then we do 2 other offerings, which are more where we get our hands dirty. So it's the factory, as we call it, where we come in and run part of the marketing, especially the marketing towards the larger accounts, as an outsourced function, but with completely open cards. And we then hand over the keys to the clients after 6 to 18 months. So we set up the factory, we run it for a while. We can run it for a long time, but we typically run it for a while. And then we hand over the keys gradually to the client, and they can hire people on their own to fulfill that. We also engage in a third model, which is deal orchestration, where we come in on a retainer and a success fee basis, and we help the client to close named deals, the specific deals, both growing a few existing accounts, but also naming nailing a few new logos that are on the dream list. So this is what we do in essence. We have other things, but this is the core. So, and these 4 half-day workshops, if you're interested, ping us. They are delivered either face-to-face, but most of the time actually now they're delivered as a hybrid. So we have some people in the room, some people are calling in using Zoom, and then we have full digital programs. So we have some cases in the US, Canada, some in Asia, and they're 100% digital. Anyway, let's kick off. I just want to repeat a few things. So first of all, when looking at, so we come across some people that say, well, we actually don't do mega deals. But what we've seen, this is interesting. So when we start off with the research, we've honed in on the top of the pyramid. So only pure mega deals, 100 million SEK or $10 million and up, and looking at the really complex deals. But what we have found out later on is that there's no one who's connected marketing, sales, social media, negotiation, content, all of that into one discipline, even on the mid-sized deals. So quite a lot of our clients are scale-ups using us on more mid-sized deals that are everything from $100,000 up to bigger deals than that, but not in the $10 million plus range. Anyway, and I'm just going to do some of the things that almost all companies that we engage with are struggling with, both the Fortune 500s, but also the scale-ups. The first one is there is a dependency on rainmakers. So even in the largest organizations in the world, you find that there is when you look at the really large deals that contribute to plus 80% of the revenue, there are 3, 4, 5 names that they name internally. So we've, for example, looked at one of the absolute largest companies in Sweden where there are 4 names that are repeated internally, and they have more than 100,000 employees. And it's definitely the same when looking at scale-ups. There's typically a dependency, generalizing really a lot here, but the founder, CEO, and typically a head of sales or something like that are really important to close the largest deals. And they need to dip their toes in all of them. And that doesn't scale really well. So we often see companies that had a good growth and then it pans out because there's a people dependency. The second one is that the messaging, which we're talking about today, is created in small islands, not just across functions. So not just messaging per function, but even worse, messaging across individuals. So when we're facing a client, we're telling different stories. So if you can test this internally. If you ask various team members across the functions, what's your story about your company? What problems are we solving? Which categories, subcategories are we competing with? How do we compete with competitors? How do we close the deals? You will get typically, you might have some exceptions on this call, but typically you get a spread out, disparate way of describing your story, which is not really good, especially if you want to win trust among the clients. And also a lot of marketing teams are lead-centric as opposed to deal-centric. This is a big shift that's happening now, especially for companies that are selling to enterprises and mega deals. And then often there's a lack of systematic approach on that's what we call it the factor. It's a systematic approach of how to engage with larger companies and win them and grow them. And we often have, and this is very clear now during COVID, we have a very high dependency on physical touch points. We've come across really proven senior salespeople. They become really handicapped when everything now is digital. So we try to make salespeople more media. And typically companies are talking way too much about themselves. The slightly better ones are talking about the problems they're solving and then about themselves. I want to touch upon this particularly. It was described in the fundamental messaging webinar, but the key importance here is that when you're selling into a company that is still organized as a pyramid, you can get the management team in one room and you can sell them on the problem definition and your solution. But when you're selling into a matrix or a cube organization, they typically have constructed ways of buying. You need to fill in a template on the business case. You need to cross several committees to sign the deal. And they don't just ask you, what problems are you solving and with which vendor? They're asking, what other alternatives have you looked at, which is what we call categories. And under the category you think is the best, what are the types of solutions way before you look into what are the vendors that are fitting in that subcategory. That makes sense. So there is a difference in how you need to sell and market when you're targeting matrices and cubes. We can cover that in depth when you want on a separate call. Anyway, another thing is that when you're doing sales, as soon as you need to pull in team members to close the deals, you're into what we call orchestration as opposed to just dialogue techniques. When you can sell on your own, then dialogue techniques are bringing you pretty far. But as soon as you bring in bring in team members on your own side, a technical expert, a delivery expert, maybe a C-level person, etc., then you're selling as a team. And then orchestration is really pivotal. And orchestration is way larger than just sales dialogues, which is the area we've noticed that we're kind of unique. So I'll give you some takeaways that are important, especially for those of you who haven't listened before. So one of the key insights from the Magnus research is that you should actually spend around half of your go-to-market budget on marketing. A lot of companies that are traditional companies selling to enterprises, whether they do enterprise or mega deals, they're very sales heavy. But the winners, the clear winners in our research, they're spending way more on marketing. And I think there's a clear reason. First of all, it's a trickier decision landscape. There are more people that need to say yes before you can close the deal. And then you need to be more precise on how you help them to buy. And to get all these people to buy simultaneously is a tricky game. And that's where marketing can make totally a difference. When you sell into a pyramid, again, it's relatively just through pure sales to get the management team in one room. Selling into a matrix or a cube, you can't. It's actually impossible. And the other balance that you need to think about is how do we balance the money between lead generation, the ongoing pipeline, and how we grow an account. And here we see the winners are spending almost equally across the three areas, whereas the losers are spending way too much on just lead generation. And also we see typically the winners are spending equal amount of money on content distribution as opposed to content creation, whereas the laggards are spending just on the content creation side and they think that that is enough. So you often see a video on a site with 17 views and you go, well, you have 200 employees, and so not even your own staff have watched this video. Anyway, so a lot of very expensive, great content is just sitting there. So into today's topic, we've covered, like Boris said, fundamental messaging, which is bringing you from wanting to buy to, from unaware to wanting to buy. We have the deal closing, which is moving you from wanting to buy to actually buying. And then orientational, which is engaging a broader range of people in the accounts you're going after, both the C-level, but also people around the team you're targeting internally. So looking at the different layers we're trying to solve with the whole mega discipline, I will show you the two ones that we are focusing on with orientational messaging. So they are highlighted here in lighter white. So we use a blend of content and targeting tactics to ensure a secure and broad entry. So this is key, actually. If you want to sell into a cube or a matrix, it's important that you engage a lot of stakeholders simultaneously. Because if you go into just one stakeholder or three, and you have too many meetings with them, I'm sure some of you have been experienced that what happens when you don't want to drive consensus? You can't leave those three, you're stuck with them. So you need to have a lot of entry points early. So it's a bit like a multi-front war. And you need to have a very secure entry, because in the enterprise and mega deal space, you can't do the, I target 100, I get 10 meetings, I get one deal. No, it doesn't work. You target 8, you need to get access to 8 eventually. And then you're not winning necessarily 8, but you need to win pretty many of them. And then the last piece, which was to amplify the dialogue during the sales process. So I will give you some theoretical examples, and then we'll actually go through a lot of examples today, which I've heard some of you really want to see. So we've tried to address that. Let's see what you think. So first of all, a first type of orientational messaging is listings. A lot of companies and people are interested in listings. What are the top 5 companies in my industry? What are the top 5 trends? What are the top 7 mistakes? Things like that. It's very, very efficient. So, and as an infiltration tactic, it's pretty efficient to write about your top targets. I'll show you some examples soon. So let's say you want to sell to the 5 biggest shipping companies in the world. What do? You write about the 5 biggest shipping companies in the world and their top executives, and also some of the stakeholders further down. I'll show you some examples there that we've been part of. Industry trends, always very popular. And the reason why some people ask, why do you have the Aston Martin car? Well, the trick here all the time is to place yourself in a bigger picture. So this is also why we're engaging a larger audience, because they might not be interested in what you're selling. But if you place yourself in a bigger context, you become interesting, or at least the bigger topic makes what you're selling contextually right. Myth busting, really, really effective. I'll show you some examples on that. I actually don't have a great example, can't show too many, on past, present, and future. This is a very effective content piece though. So when you describe what is the history of my industry, where is it now, and what will the future look like, especially if you put that in your use case where you say, okay, this situation was solved historically like this. Now it's solved like this, and then you place yourself into that picture without naming yourself. So you're putting in your subcategory in the today picture, and then you describe the future as well. Many people are interested in such a description. So portraits, I'll show you some examples where you portray both companies and individuals. So let's go into some examples here. So this is, and I have intentionally chosen this one because some people might say, well, I don't know, I can't be a thought leader. Am I credible enough to say anything about my industry? Well, this is a good example. Now, this guy is super smart, but he just turned 25. So he's an Iranian friend of mine, really bright guy, but he came into a company called Proof Analytics with no knowledge about the Proof Analytics domain and no knowledge about the e-commerce sector. And I said to him, so the fastest way for you to get up to speed is actually to research the top 30 e-commerce companies in Sweden. So, and I just gave him the skeleton that he should use in his research. And then he created a 27-page overview of each company, their financials, growth, but also the top stakeholders, a sentence or two about each. And then he reached out to these stakeholders and said, so look at what I've written about your company and about you individually. Do you think this is correct? Do you want to add something? Should I delete something? The cool thing here is that it has a 95% response rate. So as soon as you write about people and companies, they typically respond because they are pretty careful about what's written about them. And we're kind of playing on the ego here as well. So a lot of these top executives answered back and said, yeah, what you're writing is correct. You can add this, etc. And some of them pinged back and said, we could have a meeting. I like what you're writing about. So you kind of switching the power balance a bit. And the reason why I've chosen to, first of all, this is a very successful play, but it's, I guess some of you are insecure about how thought leadership you are. But this guy had no e-commerce experience and no marketing mix modeling experience, and still he managed to pull this off. And it became so successful that the three of the largest business magazines picked it up and published it. So Affärsvärlden, Breakit, and e-handel.se. And a lot of the stakeholders in these companies wanted meetings with him. And for example, Dustin, they posted this article 15 times, which is pretty incredible. And a lot of people at Dustin obviously now know who he is. This is another one. I saw Svonko is on the call. I wanted to show these examples from you. Brilliant examples. So Svonko is working at Climon, and we were together trying to infiltrate the largest cement companies in the world, but also I'll show you some more examples. So you're kind of writing about them, again, mentioning the top decision makers, also things that are going on in these companies. And when you look at the statistics, all of them are reading this article, but to varying degree. Another example, we had 147 unique individuals from one company reading this article, which as soon as you write about them, they get really interested. You can imagine if there's an article about your industry XYZ, and you personally are mentioned, would you read that article? So here's another one from Swanko, the top 10 Indian cement companies, really successful one. Here's another one, the top 5 container shipping companies, so Maersk and down, and what they do to reduce sulfur emissions. And here's the Aston Martin effect. Within this description, climate has a role. So climate is taking excess heat from the large engines that you find in these ships and convert it into electricity, which is reducing the fuel consumption and therefore also the sulfur emissions. Now you need to do more things to reduce sulfur emissions, but that is one of them. So here's where you place the Aston Martin car in the much larger Bond movie. And I think this one had, correct me if I'm wrong, Sonko, I think Maersk had 147 unique individuals reading this particular article where they were obviously mentioned. It's amazing, they have 40,000 ships. It's the largest shipping company in the world, based out of Denmark. 40,000 ships, that's a whole football arena of ships, it's crazy. There's another example, industry trend, really popular topic to use to engage a large audience. Here, Carl Berglund is talking about what the marine industry is doing to reduce sulfur, to follow sulfur regulations. So it's kind of related to this one, really successful as well. And I think, yeah, it was this one. So this one got published in the 2 largest industry publications globally within the shipping industry, because it was neutral enough. And in it, it said, so some of the initiatives to reduce sulfur is actually converting excess heat into electricity delivered by companies such as Kleinman. That small sentence was the only salesy piece of this article, but it was subtle enough that the biggest, two largest publications in the world published it anyway. And this is an important insight. The journalists sitting in business press, tech press, etc., these magazines are struggling financially, and the opportunity here is that they don't have time to do this kind of research. So when you've done the proper research, you're writing about an interesting topic and you're making it orientational enough, you will get published. So actually in this article, we didn't reach out to these 2 publications. They found it, or where people tipped them about it, and they just published it, which is interesting. Myth busting, really effective as well. So here is a relatively old, so from 2015, where I said, so I was so annoyed that a lot of even Gartner and those guys, now they don't say that anymore, but they said, well, they talked about various percentages of digital interactions before sales takes over. And I was like, but that's not how it works. You have marketing and sales are working in parallel across the full funnel. It's not first digital and then sales. That's not how it works. So I was writing about that and even mentioned some of the guys that Challenger Sales. And so you had Gartner analysts, Forrester analysts, and the Challenger Sales authors jumping into this article commenting. So you can create quite a good, positive tension by myth busting. This is another one. So a lot of experts are claiming that there is something called a SaaS go-to-market model. For me, that's absolutely absurd, because SaaS is a delivery model. But if you're selling SAP as a SaaS model, you don't have the free trial and the kind of the SDR helping you get started and that kind of stuff. That's not how it works. You have to look at who you're selling to and how complex your solution is. So as soon as you go in, again, to the matrix and the cube, and you're selling something that's cross-functional, you need to apply a mega deal or an enterprise approach. You cannot do the long tail approach. So there are actually 2 different sales and marketing models here. This is a classical myth-busting example where we're saying there is no such thing as a SaaS go-to-market model. It's very effective in your orientational messaging to talk about values. So here, for example, we're describing the value that we often see among the top mega dealers, which is similar to the ones we see in top athletes. Here's another one where we say the best performers in the mega deal space and in business in general, they love feedback. It doesn't have to be sugar-coated. They want the straight feedback. So here, this is a pretty provocative claim. Average players, I need to put, sorry. yeah, great players want to be told the truth. So, and we totally think this applies also in the negative space. Another one is to take a really large topic. So here I'm comparing global warming, pandemics, AI, so the big threats, if you want. I mean, some of these are opportunities, some of them are pure threats. Well, how do they relate to each other? Which is a topic that generates a lot of debate. So here, and in this instance, I was very active in Climb On. So global warming was the one where I was active, but then we talked about pandemics and AI and those other big trends. Very interesting topic for most. And here you can even, in a subtle way, place your company if you want, but you're taking a big grip of a huge set of topics. So another good thing on the orientational side is to portray the team members. So this is one, here's one with me. We'll soon come out with other team members where we tell a bigger story. Now this was a pretty light one, 2 minutes, 14 seconds. We'll have slightly longer portraits of some of the key members as well. Portrait is also effective when you talk about someone else. So here, David J.P. Phillips successfully is talking about PewDiePie. Some of you might know of him, some of you might not. He's very big on gaming, and he's doing his live video shows on gaming. So what David J.P. Phillips does here, he's bringing in the big names and he's analyzing how they do their acting. And obviously, as you can see on the number of views there, he's almost, I think now he's passed the 1 million views on this particular YouTube video. And here's another one where he's taking Gay Vaynerchuk, Gary V, and he's doing the same. And this also had like, I can't remember, like 1 million viewers. And here's another example where David had a lunch with Petter Stordalen. So we're portraying Petter Stordalen and some of his brilliance, but also having David into the picture. Here's another example. So at Proof Analytics, we wanted to infiltrate the marketing mix modeling experts in the biggest brands in the world. So this is United Health. They're the biggest health insurance company in the world. And we wrote portraits about the big decision makers in the MMM space globally, in McDonald's, Microsoft, United Health, etc. And again, this is Marcia, just turned 25. So don't be afraid of doing this. And when you say, okay, hi Conrado, we're portraying some of the biggest companies in the world and their MMM leaders. Can I interview you for an hour and make an article that you can then look at before we publish it? The hit rate on that is very, very high. You can take, this is an example that I think some people are tempted to do very often. I say, do this max every 50th time that you publish stuff. So you take a big global emotional topic, which is kind of far away from what you're selling. You can't see it here, but I'm saying something like, this topic is way bigger than mega deals. So that's my only mention of mega deals. But the focus is here on, I just saw this picture of this fireman who is celebrating, well, celebrate is the wrong word. What do you call it? Yeah, he's acknowledging 9/11. So he's going the same distance as the fireman did in the Twin Towers, but he's doing it in a treadmill, but with full equipment. So it's a tribute. That's probably the right word. It's a tribute to 9/11, to the 9/11 firefighters. So, and here you can see in 8,900 likes, etc., and it had over 400,000 views. Now, I'm not an influencer in any way, but even I got this reach because the topic is so emotionally charged. Now, it's very tempting to do these often, but if you continue to do these too much, you become a bit empty. So you can now and then shoot off far away from what you are. So typically, the successful content that is selling but still not selling is on the mid range. So this is pretty far away from what we're selling, but you can shoot out these max every 50th time. And I think when you start to create your orientational content, you should think about which target group do I want to attract and infiltrate. So In some cases, look at the owners. So how do I infiltrate? Let's say you want to target the biggest 5 shipping companies in the world. How do I infiltrate the biggest owners in those companies? Not just, we're often too focused on operational people. Look at board members and owners. How can I infiltrate the largest owners in this segment or around this account? Because they're typically pretty powerful. So what we've covered is some examples around various orientational messaging. So some company listings, some initiative listings, some individual listings, industry trends, some myth busting. We've covered some portraits, and I hope you appreciated those examples. Again, this is to have a broad and secure entry with the companies we want to sell to and where we want to sell more on existing clients. But it's also a way to engage a larger audience within the company you're selling to, and also some external stakeholders. So questions and answers. I hope you, we did add, as you saw, way more examples than we usually have. We're kind of geeky, so we love models. I have to say that. But now we try to balance it more with way more examples. Any questions, David?
So the questions, just to add.
Yeah, you can list questions.
Yeah, in the chat. Right? So questions in the chat around orientational messaging that you talked about today.
Any first one?
No, not so far. But
no questions.
Can't you tell a bit about how you created the Bond movie and put your IP targeting model into that, you know, how megadeals actually.
Thank you. So, and our own example is actually, so megadeals was born about 10 years ago. I ran a company called Vendemore. We were the first in the world doing IP targeted advertising to win large deals and influence large deals. Now, typically when I had a meeting, I had 5 people in the room. And when you're selling to these large enterprises, we worked with over 100 Fortune 500 companies and over 400 scale-ups. But when you sell into these companies, as we talk about here, it's very important to engage a larger audience. So, and I didn't have the name orientational messaging at that point, but we realized we need to amplify this topic. If we talk ABM, we get a few marketing nerds in the room. I'm a marketing nerd too, so no blame there. We get a few marketing nerds in the world, but in the big enterprises, the C-level and the sales side are typically more powerful. So how can we engage the C-suite and the sales leaders? So since we worked with so many Fortune 500 companies around their largest deals, and I was, for good and bad, often in that room discussing the tactics, that was a bottleneck for us. But now in hindsight, it was good for me egoistically, because I did a lot of those workshops, tactical workshops on how to win this account, how to win this tender, etc. Now, what we picked up over the years was a lot of insights on how these deals were done from some of the largest European, North American, Asian companies. So I started to collect, long time ago, a PowerPoint material that was already then called megadeals. And it was like golden nuggets. Okay, SAP, Accenture, Siemens, Tata, those Ericsson, those kind of companies. What do they do? And that became a presentation material that we ran during lunch and learns with companies that we already worked with, but we wanted to build a larger deal with them. We wanted to do the expand. So we had done the land, we wanted to do the expand, but we also used it as a land tactic where we said, okay, now, dear Carl, we've talked about this topic now on account-based marketing. Just so you know, we have collected, because we work with over 100 Fortune 500 companies and over 400 scalers, we have collected a lot of insights on how the largest deals are done. Would you and your colleagues want to see that during a lunch and learn? I can actually bring 50 salads. If you book a large room and invite the most relevant people from the C-suite, the sales leaders and the marketing leaders, I will bring the salads. So often we had actually 50 people in the room as opposed to 5. And that was the starting point of what is now megadeals actually. But now there is no such agenda as, there is no, the Aston Martin car is now the megadeals. Was that a good answer?
Yeah, yes. Great, thank you. So we have a question in the chat and privately, and it's if you make an article, a video, etc., what are your best tips to make sure the targeted people see it?
if you're making an article or a video, what are the best tips on making sure the specific stakeholders see it well? You can't use content alone. Well, you get some exposure, as you saw on LinkedIn and other social media channels, but we always recommend, back to one of the first pictures I showed, you need to add smart distribution tactics. So we're using a blend of person targeting, IP targeting, and a few other tactics, intent marketing, to reach the right stakeholders with those great videos and articles. Because yes, if you have a smashing content, that can be enough, but very often you need to combine great content with great distribution.
I would also just add, Chris, how we've been working with a lot of clients that are struggling in general to build consensus in the complex ecosystem, but specifically around reaching C-level.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to talk a bit about, because you were giving examples before about how you write about them, the companies in the C-level.
How you engage the C-level, yeah.
Yeah, just talk a bit, because we've had some great examples where we've worked, but both.
Yeah, I can share an example.
Yeah.
So we have one of our US clients. What they're selling during the sales process, they really need to engage the C-level, and the target really large companies. So it's not so easy to engage the C-level. So what we're working on right now is a set of videos and articles where we're portraying the CEOs and some of the other stakeholders, and we're sharing the drafts with them, giving them the chance to give feedback. And these people are typically, as you saw earlier, they're typically responding. So that's a great way of bonding with, in a subtle way, you're bonding with the top decision makers that you really in the end want to meet. And if you create yourself as a thought leader and as a journalist, you are. So if you look at Marciar's profile, Marciar Nodehi on LinkedIn, you can actually see that he says he's an e-commerce journalist and marketing mix model specialist. So this is an amazing way to engage.
Yeah, and to your point, if Marciar had instead done what many traditionally do, which is just try and cold call.
Yeah, he wouldn't. So if he would have tried to cold call the top executive with the e-commerce companies, he might have reached a few, but not in this short time and not with this kind of hit rate. And any one of you who are selling to a finite market, so you can't sell to anyone, and especially if you want to go for bigger revenue numbers, you need to go upstream. You need to be really smart because you can't afford a low hit rate. It needs to be very, very high. So you need to infiltrate these companies, and orientational content based on the orientational messaging is a pretty successful path.
I have one question before you. Okay. So you mentioned a broad entry before. How broad and where to start?
Good question. So here, I must say a lot of sales literature is not in line with our research. They say, always go for the top first. Well, you have outliers that can pull that off, but typically they are rainmakers, and your rainmakers are a limiting factor. So it's pretty often smart to just to do the broad play, mid range, and kind of what do you call it, middle management and below, and then you learn a lot about that company. So once you go for the C level, you have really sharp insights when you combine your domain knowledge with their exact company, their key initiatives, how they phrase them, exactly how they measure their success, both in the key initiative, but also for the whole company. Then you come in and meet a C-level person. You can have 15 minutes, but you nail it with them. So what you fail with is if you go for the top immediately, you will come in naked, and you will very often fail. So this is a very clear, distinct difference between our research and what I find in a lot of sales literature. So always start at the top. Not if you want the good hit rate. And those of you who have a finite market where the hit rate needs to be very high, you can't just cold call the top and stuff like that.
Okay, one more. Once you've made great content for a while and you want to close the deal, what action do you take? So this is more on deal closing, but
well, and this is I think an important insight. So we call this the second phase, so which takes typically 70-80% of the time, the deal closing phase, where you do the deep dives into various topics like GDPR compliance, what kind of integrations you support, how is the training done, and things like that. Deep dives into certain functionality, but also objection handling, like why would we do this now and not later, and things like that. That consumes 70-80% of the buying process, which is often hidden. What was the question?
So once you've made great content,
Yeah, now I
for a
know.
while,
Okay, yeah.
what do you
So-
want to do to close the deal?
Yeah, so this
What
is
action do you need
key.
to take?
What I wanted to come to is that there is no, I think there is a misconception in deal making. I think a lot of people that haven't been in the mega deal or enterprise game think you can kind of close the deal. That is it's a long journey to close the deal. You need to tick a lot of boxes. It's not like, so I worked once with it was a long time ago, a sales guy. He kind of stood up in a meeting and he stretched his hand to the client and said, "So are we in agreement?" And they were really intimidated. So when you're selling into a matrix or a cube, you can't really do that kind of always be closing kind of game. It doesn't really, I mean, you guys know that you've done several multi-billion-dollar deals. It doesn't work. And so there is no short answer is the answer. It's a long process, and that's something we cover in the deal closing messaging. Like some of it was covered today. We covered in the how we blend various marketing, targeting tactics, dialogue techniques. I mean, risk mitigation. Woo. The answer is probably a few webinars.
And if you want to know more about the deal closing, you can go on.
Yeah,
our
look at the
YouTube
deal
channel.
closing webinar. Now, deal closing is way bigger than deal closing messaging, to be very clear.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No more questions on this end. So we thank you for joining.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.